Hey everyone, it's been a while since I've made a video. Life kind of gets in the way and does things to you that you don't expect, and you're just trying to figure out how everything works and deal with your existential crises and your place in the universe. But I'm back, and the channel is going to change just a little bit because there is a video that I have been kind of promising a little bit to the general vibe of the channel and my audience that I was saying I was going to do. I was going to make it, but I'm going to do it. But this may very well be the last video that I do on Warhammer. Not in terms of, you know, painting or other things and live streams and that sort, but in terms of the lore, and it is because the Siege of Terra broke me. Literally. I just, yeah, it was something. But the reason why I've been putting this as off is because I originally planned on making a video series specifically on doing the Siege of Terra out of context. Basically, I have never read a single story from the Horus Heresy saga. I mean, semi-lie, I read the Master of Mankind, but it's kind of tangential, and the only thing that's actually introduced into it is a little bit about some of the Grey Knights and the Sisters, a little bit about the Custodes, and Arkan Land. But other than that, of the 60 odd books of the Horus Heresy, I have never read a single one of them. So I had no context when I decided to read this big ol' Siege of Terra. And I was gonna do a video on every single one of those books and try and describe things, but what ended up happening more outside of just regular life was that I did not like the series. There is so much that just kind of broke me about the Siege of Terra. And I wanted to finally go over it and make this, like I said, the last video that I will potentially do on Warhammer lore. Not painting, not games, other stuff, I don't know, live stream, who knows. But I'm gonna be changing up the channel a little bit with my handy tool, the whiteboard. I think I'm gonna be probably doing a bit more rants. Yes, I stole this from Daniel Green, his channel. He started doing this and I liked the idea. I love ranting, I love whiteboards. It's gonna be fun. I'm not plagiarizing, I'm just stealing. Art is about theft. So, what broke me about the Siege of Terra, and why am I finally doing this? This random hot take that, well, I mean, the hot take that comes out of this is that Warhammer books are awful. Just the worst. And I have 4 reasons why that I'm going to go over. The number one reason why I kind of had the series break me is that lore is not equal to or greater than, in any kind of case, to narrative. And that seems to be the whole problem that I think I have with the Horus Heresy and Siege of Terra, is because it is just lore. And I know this is a channel where I literally named it in real lore because I wanted to go over the lore of things, but there is something that I find comes up with Warhammer in particular, and especially the Horus Heresy after I read the series, is that it wants lore to be more important than narrative. What do I mean by that? So when I was actually reading the series, I started off with the Solar War. That's the first book in there, and I realized that there was not much in actually saying why the siege was happening, or who the characters were, what their motivations were, outside of who they would end up being. So you have someone like Abaddon, Abby, who is there, who is important. He's the first captain of the Sons of Horus. He's coming in from the top of the solar, I forget what it's called, the solar plane, the elliptical plane of the solar system. He knows 3D. He's not using it as a 2D surface. Good for him. But Abby has so many pieces of his story in there centered around on who he will end up being, who he is going to be, the Despoiler. So you have just so much that is focused on him becoming the Despoiler that it takes focus so much away from other things that are happening. You have an entire chunk of that story that is centered around how much he is not happy with the way that things are going with Horus, how he has a word bearer that is just harping on him to actually follow in with the dark gods and come with him and like be one of them. Yeah, the spoiler will come. But what purpose does it serve to the actual siege of Terra? It does absolutely nothing. It just kind of has him sitting there. And then there's a lot that I found throughout the entire series, and it was niggling me for a while. It was bothering me. And that was when I got to Eternity Gate, when it is Archenland going through no man's land towards the Imperial Palace, trying to go through all of the horrors of the world. It is just this Archenland who's just a man who is more than likely going to die because of where he is. Like, there is nothing that says that Archenland should live in this circumstance. He is just going through all this. There is Khorne berserkers everywhere. There is Chaos Space Marines. There is demons that are everywhere. And there is no reason why he should live. And that is tension. That's tension. He has tension because he is going through no man's land. He has no means of survival. It is just him in this harrowing experience. And you know what they do? Instead of just sitting there and going through this tension, being a part of the tension, like holding on to it, it cuts to a moment and it says, later, Archenland would say. Later, Archenland would say, well, why is that a problem, Nick? Why is that a problem? It's just describing something about the story. No, because this entire damn story has been in the first person perspective, and while it's been saying in the past tense most of the story, it's felt like you are in the present moment. You are only experiencing it in this one point of time. There is no narrative that goes back at any point and says, this is from the annals of such and such, that make you understand that this is a frame. There's no framing device to say that there's an external story other than the fact that it is the story. So an example of a book that I've actually read very recently is the Sun Eater series, where quite literally it starts off with saying, I am the villain of this story. I have killed trillions. I have destroyed an entire species. This is my story of how I got there. I am 1,300 years old and I will cause a complete genocide. Cool. So every time the narrator starts discussing things in the story and says like, later, this statement, later, I would look back upon this and laugh at how silly I was for thinking about it. It makes sense because there is a framing device. You understand that this is being told to you from someone in the current time about the past. But when this happens to Archenland, there is no indication that Archenland, it is just a kind of whimsical set thing that is just said. And I hate it. I hate it because everything that was happening while he's in no man's land by himself, there's tension. I don't know Archenland. I just knocked myself. I don't know who Archenland is. I don't know his story after the Siege of Terra. And to be honest, I don't know if he's gonna live. He's not Abaddon. He's not Dorn, who we know survives. We don't know that he is, I don't know, the Imps. Big E. We don't know that he's Emps, that he is going to potentially partially die and then just be sat on the throne forever. We don't know anything about what happens to Archenland, unless of course you've read the goddamn wiki. But if you don't read the wiki and you're just going through with the narrative, well, guess what? Everything that I just thought was tension about this part of the story, gone. Just completely gone. I don't know. I now know he's gonna survive this. I now know that he is going to somehow make it through no man's land and survive. And that sucks. That just sucks all of the interest out of that storyline for me, and it's just gone. And I realized how much that happens throughout every single Warhammer book. There is no tension because a character will live. There's somehow they find a way of just saying that a character will live. And it sucks. It straight up sucks. Now, before I go too far into completely, you know, I guess shitting all over the writing of these authors, because there was, 5 different authors: ADB, Dan Abnett, John French, I forget who the other authors were. Again, I haven't read these books in about 6 months. I did this 6 months ago, and I've been mulling over this idea for a while. But I won't say that their writing is bad, because it's not. There is standout moments where you realize the genius of some of these authors, that they have fantastic ideas that they're actually working with. My one thing that I will say that shows genius is the Saturnine book with Dan Abnett. That story was hands down the best one. Saturnine. It was the best book of the entire bunch, and it had one reason for that: dialogue. The opening of that book is Dorn and a former remembrancer who is about to unalive himself. He's about to jump off the parapets and end his life because he is so upset about everything. He doesn't think that what is happening, there's no way to survive, that whatever he does now is not going to matter. So he's about to jump off, and Dorn comes up and basically is just discussing with him about things. It is about, I'd say, 10 to 20 pages. I listened to it through the audiobook, but it's like a solid almost hour of a dialogue between the man that is trying to keep the world together and a guy that is just trying to end it all. And it is brilliant. I love every single second of it, because guess what? He doesn't care. God, if I can't remember the name of the remembrancer. But the remembrancer basically is saying that, why should we care what is happening? Like, what do we gain from doing anything at this point? And of course, Dorn, the one who's doing everything he can, and the only reason he's up on that parapet is because he is trying to mull things over in his mind, because he's trying to think of every single potentiality, and letting your mind just sit and put things back on the back burner allows you to think about it a little bit better. So why is it good though? It's because the characters are so, this man does such a good job of making that conversation incredible. The Remembrancer sasses Dorn at points. He tells him that, like, what's the point? Keep going. But that from that conversation actually comes the entire crux of the story. It is that the Saturnine wall will fall. Incredible. It's great. You set up exactly what the entire story will be. It's something that's directly focused on the narrative of that one point in that one story, and everything hones in on that. So instead of having all these disparate stories, everything culminates towards that. It's that the Saturnine wall will fall, or something will fall. This becomes a chess match between Dorn and Peter Turbo. Perturabo, I know his name, I'm just putting Turbo because I don't want to write the entire thing. But it becomes a chess match between Dorn and Peter Perturabo. I was gonna say it wrong again. God, I gotta get the memes out of my own head. But it becomes a chess match. Which part of the wall will fall? Dorn, now knowing that they're in Saturnine, there is a fault. Something is wrong with this wall that will cause it to fall. He has to figure out, well, if the enemy knows that, and I pull back on something else to defend it harder, it means that another part of the wall will fall, and it means that I am weaker at that point. But if he chooses something else to let that fall, and kind of make this gambit on the Saturnine wall, then he strengthens the entire position of the defense. So it's this chess game that goes on between it. And the secondary narratives through this are not just random parts of the wall. It is, these are all characters that are falling back to the walls, and they realize, and you realize, there's dramatic irony, you know the place that all of them are going, it is the port, one of the spaceports. They've decided to use that as a sacrificial lamb, but all the secondary characters are all heading towards it. They think they're going somewhere safe. You, as the audience, understand they're going somewhere that is going to fall. And you now see the gambit that's happening at Saturnine, and you see all of these characters that are going to fail. And there's such good conversations that happen in there. More dialogue. Dialogue was incredible. There is Aliandus. There's a Remembrancer, because what ends up happening is that the dialogue between Dorn and the Remembrancer, they make the new Inquisition kind of ish thing, but just trying to get the history of what is happening, so that way when they do succeed, or when things happen, they can at least remember what happens for history, because it is history in the making. So they send a Remembrancer with a bunch of guardsmen, and they're talking about faith. They're talking about the idea of stories being more important, about how that guardsman idea of we have something greater than ourselves to live for. And there's so many great moments that fit that one idea and fit the idea of the port falling. It's just brilliant. I love that entire book, but the rest of the series doesn't lean on that dramatic irony, and I will get back to that once we get there. I swear I'll get back to dramatic irony, because it is important, but it's why Saturnine in particular is the best. It's just good. Nice. If you're going to read any of them, read Saturnine. Just do it. Trust me. This comes into my second point about what's going on with Warhammer books that something about it broke me, which is focus. What is the focus of the Siege of Terra? I mean, obvious question. It is the Siege of Terra. That's the focus. But who are the characters that are your focus point? I mean, we could probably list them off, but I'm going to end up filling this entire thing because there are so many characters that are involved in it. You have Loken, Dorn, you have all of the White Scars, you have the Primarch of the White Scars, Khan. You have Khan. You have Sanguinius. You have some Blood Angels that are actually key characters. You have White Scars key characters. You have Imperial Fist key characters. Then you have Abaddon and Horus. Horus, who is just like, you know, playing the role of my father very well, absent and not really caring. You have Perturabo. You have Mortarion. You have Magnus somewhere. You kind of have Emps, which is part of this focus thing. Emps. Yeah. There's so many characters. So who's my focus? Who am I supposed to actually get? Oh, and there's Katsuhiro. There's guardsmen that show up every once in a while. And you also have some remembrancers that are coming around. Apparently they're important from the Horus Heresy, but it feels, the way that ended up feeling is, it feels like it was supposed to be trying to be endgame, is that everyone's here. Oh, it's a big thing. It's been the buildup for 20 odd years of stories that you're finally getting to the end point where they're all on Terra, they're all fighting, and we're gonna get the big ending. Things are gonna happen. Cool. But when it comes to the story, who am I focusing on? Who is the focus? Because again, if you look, taking a look at Endgame, so Endgame, who's the focus of Endgame? Despite the fact that you have all the characters that are in Marvel at that point, they all show up. Who's the focus of Endgame? You have Tony, you have Cap. They're your main focus. Those are the two characters that we have a lot of care for what happens to them and what goes through their mind about their story. There's the other Avengers that are showing up, they're doing things, but the focus is on these two. Tony wants to keep his kid. Right? He wants to keep his kid. That's his motivation. He has a life now. He wants to keep that while bringing everyone else back and bring their loved ones. Cap's motivation is live a life. They have a motivation. They have a focus. They have a through line throughout that entire thing. Tony goes back in time and sees his father. That's a huge moment for him because he gets to reconcile with his father. In a story with however many people that were in Endgame, the focus is on Tony and its focus is on Cap. Cap sees his girlfriend from the 1940s, realizes he might be able to go back and live a life with her. Amazing, really cool. The focus is on these two. What about Siege of Terra? Well, focus could be on Dorne. And Saturnine does have this focus, which is why I think it's one of the better books, because you have the focus on Dorne. Well, Emps is a big proponent of this entire thing, but there's no focus. No one cares what's happening with Emps. He is just a dude on a throne. That's it. You don't get dialogue, you don't get motivation, you just get, he is a dude sitting on a throne. Well, that doesn't give me an idea of like what he's actually thinking. What about Horus? The man behind it all, the man that is there to bring down the Emperor and create his own new one. Nope, you get nothing. Nothing matters of what Horus is actually thinking or doing. You get a little bit of it with the end and the death, but it's mostly he's just gone insane. Woo, motivation! And even then, Dorne being the focus, like I said, there's one book that is his focus. At the end, like you get a little bit about him building a sandcastle with a demon in his head going, what is the blood for? Who's the blood for? Tell me, Dorne, who is the blood for? That's all you get. What about Sanguinius? Oh yeah, Sanguinius! Beautiful, beautiful Sanguinius. No. You get some really awesome moments of him fighting, but he gets offed, and the Blood Angels go crazy, and it causes some stuff with Emps eventually, but you don't get any like indication of what Emperor is thinking about it. You get a little bit about what Horus is thinking about, but again, nothing's really happening there. These are the big names that you should be caring about. These are huge things that you should be having a focus on in your big story, and they are not the focus. Tony and Cap as Endgame being the focus make a lot of sense because they were there from the beginning. They were the heart and the mind of the Avengers. Who's the heart and the mind of the Emperor, of the Empire, of Horus's side? Oh, who knows? But you do have all these other secondary characters that you should really care about. Loken, for example. Loken, who, I'll be honest, when I first started reading Solar War, I thought he was a space wolf. I did not realize he was a Luna wolf because I forgot that the Sons of Horus were Luna wolves at one point, and there was a whole bunch of visions surrounding him. But also the name just kind of screamed Nordic to me, so yeah. He's also apparently important. He's there throughout the entire story. He does some cool stuff, again, in Saturnine. The best book. He has a really cool moment against his former comrades, against his brothers. That's really cool, but why is Loken my focus? Why is Emperor not my focus? Why is Dorne not my true focus? Why is Sanguinius not my real true focus? Who knows? But that's, again, the focus was so all over the place that I just couldn't get into it. And when you have the big end fight between Emperor and Horus that ends up basically being a Yu-Gi-Oh card game at one point, God bless you for the memes, but at the same time, I don't care. Like, I don't really care what's going on because I haven't had any kind of internal motivation for the Emperor. The Emperor's not a character. And that's the biggest weakness. I understand why the Emperor is not a character, but it makes it useless. Makes him useless. He's just there. And I know there's probably going to be people who are previous viewers of my channel about me bringing this up, but I don't care. Red Rising. Darrow is the central focus of the entire series. He has more characters in POV that come up in the later books, But the important thing is when there is a giant siege that's going on, your focus is on the main important man. What he's thinking, what he's doing, how he's going to be interacting, and what kind of games he can play. Dorn kind of plays that game in the Siege of Terra, but it's only for Saturnine. God. Why? Why? But this is what's burning me out. There's no focus. There's not like a throughput. I understand the universe is big, but everything again is in service to lore over narrative. What is the background? What is the wiki? I can get most of this from the wiki and I don't have to deal with trying to figure out any of the motivations. I just can read the story on it or read the wiki on it and I get the same information. I don't gain anything except for reading Saturnine because Saturnine is so good. I'm gonna repeat it because I thought it was amazing. But yeah, what is the focus? And I will admit there is also a really cool point earlier in the series where you have a bunch of people that are coming from other places on Terra on trains. They're guardsmen, they're going to the siege, they're there to help out with the siege. And you have this fantastic kind of juxtaposition of like them, you know, maybe something's not quite right with them. Is there chaos, like corruption that's somewhere in here? Are they worried? They're from like they made tanks and everything for the Imperium. Maybe like what's going on? But is there chaos, corruption? I don't know. And then they show up at the siege and they unfurl a giant Eye of Horus. That was great. I know a lot of people disparage it, but I thought that moment was great because I was in tension about what their motivations were. It was good. The next point that I'm going to be talking about specifically around this is what this word is, or term, I guess. Dramatic irony. Where is it? I don't know. I couldn't really find it. Now, what do I mean by dramatic irony? Dramatic irony is basically the notion that you as an audience have more information than the characters that are in that story. You know what is going to happen before that happens to the characters. So take, for example, you have a little scene where you have a table and someone's put a bomb here. Well, everyone's sitting here talking around this table. You know this bomb is here. They do not. Now you know that bomb is going to go off eventually. There's tension, there's understanding. Oh, how is it gonna happen? Like when, at what point of the conversation are both of these people going to die? Is the bomb actually going to go off? Are they gonna figure out that it's there, that they need to get rid of it? Who knows? You don't know. Where's that in the Siege of Terra? I mean, we all know, going into the Siege of Terra, that the Emperor is going to get mortally wounded, Horus is going to die, Siege of Terra will be broken, and everything will be hunky-dory except for how awful and horrible everything will be for the next 12,000 years, because boo-hoo, grimdark is the way things are. But where's the dramatic irony with, you know, the siege is gonna fall? This is where I'm gonna come back to my favorite of the bunch, which is Saturnine. Saturnine is great solely because it is dripping with dramatic irony. You know things are gonna happen that the characters do not. All of the guardsmen, the White Scars, and other characters that all end up at the gate, the spaceport, are going to die. They're gonna disappear. They're not gonna matter anymore. But that makes their story that much more interesting because their conversations are kind of centered around the idea of a hopeless endeavor, about them triumphing despite that and standing up for as much as they can. It's good. Every time they talk about it, about the history, about stories, about moving on for more, when they stand up with the visage of the Emperor and hold a spot because they have the grace of the Emperor in their heart, they will be able to do it. It's that much better because of this dramatic irony. But that disappears. after Saturnine. You know there is hopeless endeavors, but it just doesn't lean into it as hard as Saturnine does. There's also a lot that you don't know that's going to happen, because there's parts of you that are remembering the spaceport is going to fall, but Saturnine won't. Saturnine's not going to fall because Dorn knows that there's a weakness in there and they will plug it. So they set a trap. How's that trap's going to go off? You don't know, but there's a trap. And so on the other side of the coin with the traders, you have conversations with Abaddon, who is working with Fulgrim and Perturabo to try and figure out there is a issue with the Saturnine wall. They should take advantage of it. They should try and go there. And like, if they go past the Saturnine wall, they have a straight shot to the Emperor himself. But you know it's plugged. You know there's a trap there. So you know on both sides there is something bad about to happen to both sides. And that makes it so good. But that idea is missing from the rest of the story, because when you have characters like Sanguinius, you know how he's going to die. You know he's going to die at the hand of Horus. He knows it too. So he starts doing more and crazier and crazier things. But because he basically has the same amount of information as us, it makes every battle he goes into a kind of, well, he's going to win. Pat Bunda is going to fight him. He's going to win. Angron, he's going to win. 5 warhounds that are coming at the wall, he's going to win. Who cares? Yeah, Sanguinius, he's just gonna walk in there and kill everyone. He's gonna be fine. He dies by Horus's hand. If we know that Sanguinius is gonna die by Horus, but he doesn't, makes every battle that much more interesting, because, okay, if he's gonna die by Horus, we know he's going to die by Horus. He thinks he's gonna die. He thinks every battle might be his last. But then there's some triumph with it, but also dread with every battle he does win, and then every wound he takes. Instead of, I fought Angron kind of injured me a bit. I still have to keep fighting. Where's the dramatic irony? We know this. We know that Terra will not fall. But the entire story, it doesn't have that focus enough to take advantage of it. And it saps the fun out of it, and that always, I find, happens with Warhammer books, is because they don't take advantage of having that dramatic irony. Say, a good example of use of dramatic irony is a character that you know is going to end up being evil. And I've heard this brought up, it's with Star Wars. And how they failed with the prequels, but actually succeeded with the Clone Wars, is that you know Anakin is going to become Darth Vader. So while he's going through all of his adventures and everything, you know in the back of your head, how does someone fall to become Darth Vader? The movies don't do a very good job of it. He's just a whiny bitch, essentially. But apparently in the Clone Wars, I haven't watched them because I just couldn't get into them. I was kind of done with Star Wars at this point. But they do a very good job of showing how much he cares for the people around him, genuinely cares for the people around him. He is a bit reckless, he's a bit headstrong, but those are good qualities that are then twisted against him to make him evil. That's the dramatic irony. You know he's going to become Darth Vader. How does those core tenets of who he is, how much he loves his friends, how much he would do for them, how much he would put his life on the line for them, turn against him? Very interesting. You don't have that. They don't take advantage of it. And it sucks everything out of me, except for Saturnine. I'm gonna come back to that a lot, I know. But genuinely, Saturnine is just that good. Now, the next point that kind of killed me is satire. Warhammer was originally a satire on quite a few things. Satire in the way that you normally don't think of satire. Most of the time when you think of satire now, you're kind of thinking things like not another teen movie, scary movie, or other things that are just kind of poking holes into genre conventions through comedy. This is satire in the way that it is poking holes in the notions behind specific ideologies or specific ideas of governance through darkness, through a harsh light on the basically overwhelming you with the end goal of ideologies. Because the Empire, the Imperium, are evil. Shock, what? The Imperium? Evil? No, God Emperor, good. That's the point. Yes, but where's the satire in the Siege of Terra? It's just a story for the sake of filling out a kind of hole in the lore. How did you reach this point? And that's kind of where I lost the track of it. Is like, well, where's the satire and religion that existed all throughout 40K? The fervency of zealotry and the fervency of belief, it's kind of gone. Like the cult of the Emperor starts showing up, and they're wearing skulls to try and hide themselves against death, but it feels like it was kind of an afterthought to fit in with everything else that happens with 40K. You have the idea of the false gods, the chaos gods, just corrupting everyone around them. There is a bit about faith with the guardsmen and standing up. It's just, It feels like what's happened, especially with Warhammer and everything to do with the Siege of Terra, is that the satire aspect of it is gone. It feels like it is just for the sake of what it is now, instead of actually trying to specifically say anything in a broad aspect. Again, I am saying this broadly, but there are still good ideas in there. There is the notion of history, the notion of faith and stories that Dan Abnett brings up in Saturnine. I know, I keep saying Saturnine, but genuinely, he does the best job of this, but he's talking about the idea of fervency in the face of high evil. Ollie, the character, the guardsman, stands up against Angron in a kind of mock disposition of Oleandus Pius. Oleandus? God, oh yeah, that's a whole other friggin' storyline that goes on in the Siege of Terra that just kind of goes nowhere. Ollie, anyway, in a kind of mock of Ollie standing up to Horus, he stands up to Angron and shoots against Angron, just dies. But there's a little bit of satire of like these like stories of military. But that's kind of where it is. The satire just, it falls flat and it just doesn't come across. Again, with the dramatic irony, it's written for the sake of being written. And again, I'm not disparaging the authors. They're writing, and some of the authors are doing really good jobs at writing amazing characters, but it's amazing characters not in service of anything that is satirical or very interesting at this point. And it's kind of killed my enjoyment of the series, of Warhammer for lore, or not for lore, but of actually reading some of the stories. I can just read the wiki and I'm fine, and I can build my models, I can paint them up, I can play the games, and I'm perfectly happy, but I think, yeah, it's killed me off. All this comes back to my original point of this video, which is this may well end up being the last Warhammer video that I end up doing. And what am I going to be doing instead? Well, if I'm not going to be doing Warhammer, I'm going to be doing something else. I'm going to be in love with Miss Whiteboard. Love you. But Miss Whiteboard and me here are going to be going over other stories. We're actually going to be focusing on other sci-fi books. Narratives in those books. And my own work. Yes, my dear viewer, I'm going to be doing my own work. I'm actually going to be focusing on my own stories from now on, instead of actually trying to figure out and delve into the lore of other people's work. But my main focus will always be on narratives because I think that is the more interesting part of it. As much as you can have the background, which we find so fascinating, it's more important to be focused on the narrative. Lore is always in service of a narrative. Always. Narrative. That is the focus. And I think that's what gets lost sometime, and I think that's where Warhammer kind of ended up being for me, is how much the focus was on the lore, instead of letting it just be subservient to narrative. And that's where I want to work on. My own book work? Well, what is my own work? Well, I have two stories, two main things that I want to work on. And the first one is being Ethos. What is Ethos? Good question. Very good question. Ethos is actually a story that I've had in my mind for a very long time, with the use of science fiction blending into fantasy. I know that's not a new concept. That's basically Wheel of Time and a lot of Brandon Sanderson, but I have something that I really want to say with it and I want to focus on. So that is something I'm going to be working on, because I do have a magic system that I think will work really nicely. But I'll be following some of Sanderson's rules when it comes to magic systems. And I think this also comes to the same point of his magic systems. His number one rule is that magic, and the magic that you wield in a story, is subservient to the narrative. Same thing with lore, subservient to narrative. Maybe this is also because I've been playing Elden Ring, and there is where another point where the lore is again subservient to the narrative. Things that happen in that game only happen because of the lore, but lore is only there in service to the narrative to make it make sense of why you're there to kill God. Well, you're there to kill God because the shattering and everything else that happened 10,000 years ago. That is interesting. That's really cool, but it's subservient to the narrative. Magic systems are subservient to the narrative. Everything is subservient to the narrative, because that's all that matters in the end, is stories. So the channel is going to be mostly focusing on stories in general. Other science fiction books that I do want to talk about, I want to talk about Sun Eater. I want to talk about Mistborn. I know I am very late to the game with Mistborn. I don't know why. I just never read Brandon Sanderson, but I just started reading Mistborn and ooh, boy, good. God, Vin is such a good character. But this is where the channel focus is going to be on from now on. Next story, or next video I will probably end up doing is going to be on other science fiction books. Mostly on what I have been reading, especially the Sun Eater series, because there are 6 books, and I have read, wait, no, has there been 6 books? Or has there been 7? I don't know, but I read all of them in the last 6 months because I am a freak and I will read everything that is around me, like a voracious vor enthusiast. Why did I say that? Either way, this is going to be the focus from here on out. Oh, the other story, Droppers. What is Droppers? What is Droppers? What is Droppers? Huh? Maybe it's, what does dropping mean? What does it do? How is it interesting? Stay tuned. For now, this is where the channel is going to be leading for the next little bit. I'm going to be doing the next video on science fiction books that I've been reading, why I find them interesting, and I'm going to be spending more time with the whiteboard and the rants, because I find this fun.